Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my MLK Weekend reading wrap-up. Martin Luther King Jr. was a prominent African-American religious figure and leader in the civil rights movement in mid-century America, so we commemorate him with a special day, one of our federal holidays, often used as a day of service or day of remembrance of civil rights issues. I just did a post on my Jewish DC blog about some services that a lot of the Jewish institutions in DC are holding in honor of MLK Day. But anyway, segue time. From that period, I just read this book, Up the Down Staircase by Belle Kaufman, which takes place in a recently integrated school in New York in 1964. The integration is only part of the story. It's part that sort of stuck out to me the most, I suppose, as a observer from the 21st century. But the bulk of this novel, which is an epistolatory novel, is about this teacher, this new teacher in a high school who, through memos and letters and other sort of found documents, is able to highlight what it means to be a teacher in this environment. And there's so much just fascinating layers about the clerical craziness that they have to adhere to. I mean, that so much of the job is just about adhering to various memos and patrolling hallways and what have you, and about desperately trying to corral overly populated classrooms with not enough teaching supplies to get stuff done, not enough books and all of that. And then also we get into our teacher Sylvia Barrett's not only feeling overwhelmed, but how she comes to terms with what she wants to be as a teacher and how she wants to reach out to these kids. And we get to see a few of the kids throughout her first semester. I referenced integration, and we see particularly one Puerto Rican kid and one African American kid, and how they're responding to her and responding to being in this new environment. And it was interesting to see a perspective from that time period. I feel like, Sylvia Barrett, the teacher, she annoyed me in a way because I don't think she was able to see the real picture of civil rights issues of that era, and that things just weren't magically better for minorities because of integration. But, that's, a plausible character issue, I thought. But objectively, I think Sylvia Barrett kind of annoyed me just because she was a little too perfect, a little too, innocent and beautiful and wonderful scholar turns into, like, beleaguered teacher. I don't know, it just seemed a little too stereotypical or something. And the format of the novel was amazing for showing the school system, but it didn't necessarily flesh her out as a character. So I don't know, that stuck out to me as sort of an objective weakness. But overall, I thought this was really a great, fascinating novel, and worth all the hype that everyone's been promising me. Another novel that I finished recently at long last is The Beast is an Animal by Peternelle van Arsdale, the last novel on my autumn 2017 reading list. It is a dark fairy tale taking place, I believe, in a medieval Wales-esque setting where these two girls turn into unnatural and vengeful creatures after being thrown out of their village along with their mother. And they start to get these magical powers, and they decide to seek revenge on the village that shunned them by eating the souls of all the adults and leaving the children behind. And there's one child, our protagonist Alice, who is awake at the night, and she comes across these girls, and we can see that they have similar powers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Alice is going to be bad about all of it. But it does mean that her new village that begrudgingly takes her and the orphans in sees her as a witch. And so we kind of follow her through her new life, where she and her fellow townschildren are treated as second-class citizens, and she in particular is treated as a dangerous element. And meanwhile there's a supernatural plot afoot in the background that Alice gets caught up in, and it's mostly, I believe, a commentary on prejudice, and it's also, I could could tell, but I never feel like, I think I knew this before, but I forgot before I read it that this would be a YA novel, because I heard about it through a podcast that doesn't necessarily cater to YA. I mean, it does sometimes, but it's not its primary focus, so for some reason I didn't think of it as YA until I started reading it, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a YA novel, and I don't hold that against this book necessarily. I enjoy a lot of YA fantasy, but this one I think fell a little short. I hoped it would be a little more atmospheric and a little more moody, but it was a little too straightforward. There was love interests that kind of got too schmaltzy, and I mean, it was enjoyable, but I was kind of hoping that it would be more spooky and have more layers than it ultimately did, but it did have some interesting stuff. I mean, this figure here is a girl who looks like a tree, and that was well described in the book. And so, yeah, enjoyable, but not as rich as I was hoping. I'm also making progress with Best American Short Stories of 2017 as guest edited by Meg Wolitzer. The last story that I really enjoyed, let me look at it to hopefully get all the names correct, is A Small Sacrifice for an Enormous Happiness by Jai Chakrabarti. Apologies. And it is a story that takes place in India, and I don't know, I got the impression that it was maybe a couple decades ago, but I think part of me was responding to the homophobia in it, and I know that India is not exactly in the same place as the U.S. is publicly on gay issues, but this story takes place, it revolves around two men. One, the protagonist really, is this wealthy landowner who lives in this colonial house, and he has a lot of possessions that harken back to imperial days and sort of Western influences. And he has a secret lover who lives in the village and is more of a manual worker, and the man decides after his sister has a baby that he also wants a baby, so he's trying to orchestrate this secret sort of thing with his lover and his lover's wife, and it doesn't really go the way he wants, but I just thought that the setting was really evocative and that it really came alive so easily. And I also thought that this character, the main character was Nikhil, was really well drawn, and you could see his motivations, and he also just had you know, different layers to him too, like this interesting sort of stuffiness. And even though he's a gay man who, you know, wants more out of life than society is able to give him. In other ways, he's more conservative, and so it was interesting to see how that played out. So I really enjoyed that story. And I've been enjoying all of the stories overall, but I haven't found another one for the past few stories that's popped out to me as extra special, so I'm hoping to find another one of those soon. Then today I started The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I was actually traveling around a bit on the metro today, and it fit so nicely into my purse and wasn't too heavy. But that's only part of the reason I chose to pick this up. There's several reasons, really. This book I got in an interesting way. I got in September. The DC Public Library, in honor of Banned Books Week that the American Library Association puts on every year, they had a month-long scavenger hunt, and they picked 6 titles, and The Handmaid's Tale was one, of dystopian titles that have been banned in certain settings, and they hid them in various spots around the city. This was the first book that I found in a local coffee shop, and I've been wanting to read The Handmaid's Tale for a while. At first I was kind of afraid to read it because of the subject matter, but admittedly, ever since the TV show has come on air and has gotten a lot of buzz, good buzz and awards, I've just been growing more and more interested in watching the TV show, and therefore in reading the novel, and I wanted to read the novel first, so I was glad to get my hands on it in the scavenger hunt, and of course I also want to read all these books that I got for free, so I figured it was time to start doing that too. This copy of The Handmaid's Tale is relatively new. It was made in part for the Hulu series, and it includes an essay by Margaret Atwood that she wrote in February of 2017. And she talks about her inspiration for writing The Handmaid's Tale, that she was living in West Berlin and traveling around to communist countries and sort of looking into how these countries were run, and this sort of totalitarianism that was above everyone, like this storm cloud, this big brother watching sort of thing. And then she goes into a lot of the themes of the book and things that she's been asked about throughout all of these years, and finally she does tackle the latest American election, which she writes, "In the wake of the recent American election, fears and anxieties proliferate. Basic civil liberties are seen as endangered, along with many of the rights for women won over the past decades, and indeed the past centuries. In this divisive climate, in which hate for many groups seems on the rise, and scorn for democratic institutions is being expressed by extremists of all stripes, it is a certainty that someone, somewhere, many I would guess, are writing down what is happening as they themselves are experiencing it, or will remember and record later if they can. Will their messages be suppressed and hidden? Will they be found centuries later in an old house behind a wall? Let us hope it does not come to that. I trust it will not." And that harkens to the way that this novel is told. I don't think necessarily officially, like not like Up the Down Staircase where it's official documents, but I guess this is supposed to be Offred's diary of sorts. I'm not actually entirely sure how she's writing it down. I might have missed something, but I've read the first few chapters and I'm finding it more engaging than I thought I would. I read Margaret Atwood's more recent novel, or actually listened to it on audiobook, and I actually wasn't that impressed, but this one is speaking to me more. I think it's more straightforward in a way, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm hoping to get through it relatively quickly. I want to watch that Hulu series. And finally, this would be a good time to tell you of my goal for January, to make this a read your own damn books month, because I have so many unread books on my shelf. Because I've officially failed with this next one. This comes from the library. It is BED-STUY is Burning by Brian Platzer, and I have a good excuse because I'm reading it for my book club, and so I'm being social with this one, and that's one of my other goals in life, is to take what social opportunities I can to get out of the house. This is also a book that I put on my new official Jewish-themed books published in 2017 reads list, so I'm glad that my book club decided to vote on it for this month. And we'll be meeting in a couple of weeks, so I should get to this one soon. I'll read from the flap. Aaron, a disgraced rabbi turned Wall Street banker, and Amelia, his journalist girlfriend, live with their newborn in Bedford-Stuyvesant, one of the most dynamic and volatile neighborhoods in New York City. The infusion of upwardly mobile professionals into BedStuy's historical brownstones belies the tensions simmering on the streets below. But after a cop shoots a boy in a nearby park, conflict escalates it to rioting, with Aaron and his family at its center. Pulled into the riot's vortex are Antoinette, the devout nanny to Aaron and Amelia's son; Jupiter, the single father who lives on their block with his son Derek; Daniel, Eric's unhinged tenant in their basement apartment unit; and Sarah, a smart high school dropout roiling with confusion and rage. As the day unfolds, these diverse characters are forced to reckon with who they are and what truly matters to them. Through the lens of one catastrophic day emerges a portrait of a changing neighborhood and its residents as they struggle to raise children, establish careers, and find love, fulfillment, and meaning in their lives. Sharp-eyed, fast-paced, and emotionally compelling, BED-STUY is Burning offers a window into an array of complex lives and deftly wrestles with the most pressing issues of our time with unflinching focus, wisdom, and hope. I think a lot of people who are looking at this book are looking at it as in a more broad light than I am, due to race and class issues about gentrification of neighborhoods and what it does to the people who live there and can no longer afford it. And of course there's something referenced in here with the shooting that speaks to the civil rights issues of our times, and how a reminder that conflict and strife did not end in the 60s. And I've heard mixed reviews about how well he handles this, and I know I'm personally very interested in how he handles the Jewish family and their involvement in all of this, but certainly I expect that these broader issues will be sort of more in focus, and I'm hoping that he does a good job. And that about covers it for me. Man, it has been a crazy week this week. On Monday in the DC area, it was really, really icy. Like so bad that my writing group canceled our meeting, and I have a lot of trouble on ice. I actually shattered a kneecap about 10 years ago, just slipping on some water in a hallway. Anyway, but I've never had great balance on ice. I just... It's always a bit of a stressful, crazy endeavor for me, and I didn't even get home all the way by myself. A kindly stranger held my hand and helped me not slip and fall to shatter more bones on my way home. So, and then I got home and my computer was acting crazy. I don't know, it was not letting me into my account, and I changed my password and it would only work once, and it was, oh my god, it sucked. But luckily all of the ice is melted and my computer is working fine now, so hoping for better things for next week, and certainly the reading is going well, so that's a good sign. So thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.